Rabbi Professor David Hartman, who has worked closely with Krister Stendahl over the years in establishing and leading the Theology Conference, which celebrates its 22nd year this very week, will open with a personal note. We shall then turn to our panel discussion, which will be dedicated to one of Krister Stendahl's most potent concepts in the field of interreligious dialogue, holy envy, the concept that gives this evening its title. I shall say a few words of introduction about holy envy, as well as introduce to you the three speakers shortly, but first, David Hartman.
I met Krister Stendahl through the initiative of Mayor Teddy Kollek, when Bishop Stendahl was involved in a major committee that looked after the spiritual concerns of Jerusalem. And I remember meeting him when we were still not at this location, when we were in 28 Rachel Imenu, and he had an amazing ability to neutralize any tensions, because it's not easy when you bring people of diverse faith communities to be present with each other for a whole week. And whenever the atmosphere got tense, Bishop Stendahl had this ironic smile in which the whole thing quieted down and the holy wars were over. His very most important point to me was his notion that religious people understand themselves differently when they are in the presence of the other. The presence of the other should lead towards a much deeper sense of self-criticism, a deeper sense of religious humility. And this was for him the guiding motive of beginning the theology conferences. And interestingly enough, he walked around in the Institute with his, bishop clothing with a big cross, and I can imagine the Haredi community coming forward and causing the building to explode. But in a sense, he walked that way because he wanted to be met as the Bishop of Stockholm, as a very serious Christian theologian and a very serious human being who sought to develop a climate of mutual religious understanding between people. I really loved that man, and I remember when he asked me to come to the United Church, what is it called? The World Council of Churches. What? World Council of Churches, right. It was being held in England, and he said, David, I'd like you to come and speak there. If Krister says, darf man folgen. So I went to the World Council, and I remember what was this gentleman doing. And he had difficulty walking, very difficult, and he was in great pain. He was up the whole night trying to get the World Council of Churches to rescind their doctrine of mission to the Jews and to in some way create a different atmosphere. So after I spoke, he got up before all the bishops and they said, do you think we have to convert Hartman? Do you think in some way that we should provide some mission to spiritually enlighten him? So they all were embarrassed, because that's how Krister pushed him. He had the straight talk, no fancy baloney stuff. And I remember the bishops then from Russia and others saying, I agree with you, Stendahl. However, my congregation wouldn't understand it. If I give up mission to the Jews, it's like rabbis saying, I would love to be here and celebrate pluralism, but my institution and members of my congregation would not understand it. You give legitimacy to the reform and conservative movements? How's that possible? But for him, I remember that whole night, I don't know where he had the energy from, working hard to see if he could bring about a change in the World Council of Churches. I don't know if he succeeded, but he surely succeeded in influencing me in a very deep way. He was at my home often, and when we began the conference, who was David Hartman? So if I'd send a letter to Elaine Pagels, would you come to this interfaith discussion that the Institute here is organizing? So she'd say, who is this schlep? But I didn't do that. It was Krister who always would invite the leading scholars at Harvard, the leading scholars in University of Chicago, and in California. What's that called in California? Graduate Theological Union. The letters would go out from Stendahl. And if it went out from Stendahl, people could not be indifferent to it. His reputation was so compelling, and many of them were his students. I remember Elaine Pagel said I didn't have the energy to come, but Krister asked me. And she came. So what can I say? I really loved that man. He was at my home for Seder's. We walked and we talked. I saw courage. I saw intellectual integrity and intellectual depth and a capacity to make you feel comfortable in his presence. He never inhibited anyone spiritually. So we can talk at these conferences. He set the tone. A tone of intellectual honesty, a tone which is in some way not patronizing, a tone which was in some way the willingness of each of us to expose each other without embarrassment to the claims of the other. This is a very important thing, because usually when you meet, a Jew would meet a Protestant or Catholic or others, we wouldn't want to talk about Judaism from a critical perspective. We have to put on a nice face and show how beautiful Judaism is. In Krister Stendahl's presence, and this is his great contribution to our theology, I wouldn't call it conferences, it's our theology meeting of each other and talking about our own respective faith with honesty, with no apologetics, and feeling comfortable, feeling that people are listening to you as you're trying to understand yourself in the presence of the other. So I appreciate, Menachem, that the conference it's a holy moment in Jerusalem when the Christian scholars and Muslim scholars come together here with Jewish scholars, and you see them, it's not like very normal. It's not, what are we having here? Which is this underground conspiracy. It's sort of like the feeling you have being in the press. That's how I feel in the group, is that this is so normal. It's such a nice, normal way to be, to learn with each other, to listen to each other, and to be critical of each other, without triumphalism, without feeling I have Jewish history behind me, and I remember all the pogroms, and I have to justify and explain the greatness of Judaism. No, I feel very relaxed, much more so than I am with other people. And it's Krister's great gift to all of us. And we still feel his presence and spirit. To talk with each other honestly, to meet each other's respective faiths and respective passions with integrity. So in some way, what we do at the conferences is really in his spirit. And he has in some way brought pluralism to the Institute in a very significant way. And I remember I promised Teddy that if he gives us land, we will be a place of welcome to people of all faiths, and that Jerusalem will not be represented by the black hats or the Haredis or by the rabbinate. And Teddy made possible us to get this land, and I would say not Teddy, but Krister, because Krister's influence on Teddy was very great. His influence was all over. In fact, my first book, A Living Covenant, was published by his recommendation. Free Press sent the book to him, and he wrote a very beautiful letter. And I'm deeply grateful for him providing a place for me within the Christian theological world. So Menachem, that's my personal note. No lecture, just a confession of gratitude and admiration for a great human being who bore witness to the dignity through his own life, not by his writings only, by his own life and the way he met you and the way he talked with you and the way he listened. I used to see him at the conferences sitting in that corner there, smiling, and then being able to create such an easy atmosphere. I loved him, and I think his great gift to Jerusalem is that he enables Christian and Muslim scholars to feel comfortable and welcomed in a Jewish institution. Thank you.